I'm Grant Walker. Welcome to Heads Up for Friday, the 1st of May. Weekend Review will be streamed from 4 p.m. today, and Heads Up will return 10 a.m. Monday. The dollar. New Zealand dollar rose against the Australian dollar after New Zealand's Reserve Bank kept interest rates on hold yesterday, as speculation grew that the Reserve Bank of Australia will cut interest rates at its meeting next week. The Kiwi jumped to 96.4 Australian at 8 this morning and to 76.31 US. The Australian dollar weakened amid growing speculation that the RBA will cut its benchmark interest rate to a record low 2% at its Tuesday meeting. In a report from Australia cited by traders overnight, The Age newspaper's economics editor Peter Martin said concern about a deteriorating economic outlook and a resurgent Australian dollar will force the RBA to cut interest rates. Traders are pricing in a 62% chance of an interest rate cut at the meeting, according to the overnight index swap curve. ANZ said the Kiwi will probably trade between 95.6 and 97 cents today. And in New Zealand today, State Valuer Quotable Value will publish its housing data for April at midday. Finance Minister Bill English will give a pre-budget speech to a lunchtime meeting at the Wellington Employers Chamber of Commerce. In Australia, data is released on manufacturing, house prices, producer prices and commodity prices. Traders will also be eyeing today's release of China's April Performance of Manufacturing Index. China is the largest trading partner for both New Zealand and Australia. The New Zealand dollar slipped to 67.95 euro, gained to 49.7 British pence, and up to 91.1 yen. The TWI gained to 78.71. In dairy news, Fonterra's Chief Financial Officer, Lucas Pallavicini, is refusing to say if yesterday's late-season disappointing downgrade in its Farmgate milk price is a harbinger for next season's payout. Yesterday, Fonterra announced its reduced forecast Farmgate milk price from $4.70 a kilogram milk solid to $4.50 for this season, which ends on May 31. Fonterra's Farmgate milk price drop amounts to a forecast cash payout of $4.70 to $4.80 for the season, when the estimated dividend range of 20 to 30 cents is factored in. Although the final milk price for this season will not be confirmed until Fonterra's annual general meeting in September, there's widespread pessimism across the industry that a sub-$5 payout this season will prove to be a harbinger for next season. Mr. Pallavicini says, honestly, right now our focus and concern is for our farmer shareholders for this season and how we can help them ramp up their production for next season. Next season's milk price, he says, will be the topic of the review we have to do at the end of May. That decision is not being welcomed by Federated Farmers Dairy Industry spokesman Andrew Hoggard, who's calling for clarity over how next year's forecast prices are shaping up and before the end of May. Mr. Hoggard says that as farmers work through the next few weeks and look to dry cows off for the winter, it would be beneficial for them to already have the forecast payout for next season so they can factor that into their planning this winter. Mr. Hoggard says that you really need to crunch the numbers, and without some numbers to crunch, it's a bloody hard job. The longer we leave it, the more you have gone and set yourself up for next season. You've dried cows off, you've spent money on dry cow therapy, and you've put in measures for a certain cow number. If I could ask one thing of dairy companies right now, that would be it. I know it's tough because the market is constantly changing, but at the moment farmers are just guessing amongst themselves. However, in response, Mr. Pallavicini says he thinks that forecasting the next season by the end of May is already a challenging endeavour. He said, I fully understand the interest of our farmers to have the milk price for next season for their budgeting and farm production decisions. We consider these elements all the time, but there's no point in giving out information that we have to rewrite shortly afterwards.
In news from Parliament, health and safety so-called dickhead bureaucrats have come under fire from a government MP at a select committee. The comment from senior National MP Chester Burrows came during a briefing on issues facing the meat and wool industry from Beef and Lamb New Zealand executives. Mr Burrows, who's been MP for Wanganui since 2005 and who's also currently Deputy Speaker, told the Select Committee there are too many bullshit rules being put forward by health and safety officials. The questions of the accident rate among quad bikes was raised, and Beef and Lamb Chairman James Parsons told MPs new rules being proposed are too rigid and in some cases could even reduce safety. One proposal is to allow no passengers on quad bikes at all. Mr Parsons told MPs that often, for example at Beef and Lamb New Zealand's own field days, more experienced bike riders doubled the less experienced. MPs were told an outright ban on allowing passengers would lead to less experienced quad bike riders riding on their own and probably increase the number of accidents. Beef and Lamb is talking with other farm groups, such as Dairy New Zealand and Hort New Zealand, about their similar concerns in the area. Mr Burrows told the industry group he had attended many farm accidents before he was a Member of Parliament, and he's aware of the risks on farms. He says those who do not use farm equipment safely should be prosecuted. But he said there's too much bullshit rule-setting going on. Mr Burrows said, "If I can help you in any way I can in dealing with the dickhead bureaucrats who work in health and safety, I don't know where they've been working, but it's not in a farm or a factory." It would be a growing area of concern, he continued, in all our electorate offices at the moment about the regulations coming out of health and safety at the moment. I would encourage you and your members on a case-by-case basis to go to your MP and kick the shit out of each issue. It is absolute bullshit. And that colourful story from Rob Hosking.
NBR Radio. With the Property Press. It's out now to show you around.
I'm Grant Walker with Heads Up. Here's what's trending on NBR Online. Ports of Auckland Happy Council have accepted the wharf deal, but naturally not everyone is happy. McDonald's cans 0-hour contracts. The OCR statement's out, but at the same time, Fonterra slashes the Farmgate milk price. Carter Holt Harvey in selling mode, so what's been sold and how many job losses? The Auckland Council plays down the Taniwha tax. Obama has a stern warning over the TPP. And Ombla will manage the Sarah wind down. If you're travelling today, fine weather everywhere. To find out more on our stories, log on to nbr.co.nz or stay tuned. Those stories coming up next on NBR Radio. The food industry. Oreo biscuits have been around for over 100 years, but they're still as popular as ever. In 2014, global retailers sold more than US $3.2 billion worth of those cream sandwich cookies. Mondelez International, the company that owns the famous Nabisco brand, has employed a proven strategy to keep fans excited about the product and give it more longevity than most snack foods. Every few months, the company releases a wacky flavour: birthday cake, red velvet, candy corn, caramel apple and limeade, just to name a few. Jared Korten, senior food analyst at Euromonitor International, says we're seeing a lot of snack brands try unusual flavours, and a lot of this has to do with companies trying to appeal to the millennial consumer. Young consumers aren't looking for the same things their parents ate, and they're more willing to take a risk. That risk is also paying off for brands such as Lay's with its Do Us a Flavour contest and Doritos Dusted Mashups that helped revive Taco Bell. Mr. Curtin thinks Mondelez is keenly aware of the viral nature wacky snack flavours can have with the social media savvy consumer. But are any of these new flavours actually worth buying? The latest Oreo flavour is Cotton Candy Cream, a carnival theme just in time for the North American summer. The bright blue and pink swirled frosting definitely lets you know this isn't a natural snack, but it really tastes like cotton candy. It's sweet but light and fluffy. Tasters reports say it should even appeal to people who claim not to like the American version of what we call candy floss. In legal news, Meredith Connell's Brian Dickey will continue as Crown Solicitor for Auckland when the Crown warrant splits in mid-May. While Meredith Connell continues with all Crown prosecution work for Auckland, the newly created Manukau warrant has gone to Natalie Walker. Ms Walker is a former Meredith Connell partner, now at Kays Fletcher Walker. In October last year, Attorney General Chris Finlayson decided to split the Auckland region's warrants from 1 to 2. The decision followed the appointment of former Meredith Connell partner Simon Moore QC to the High Court bench, as well as the enactment of the Criminal Procedure Act and funding changes. Meredith Connell has held the Crown warrant for Auckland since 1922. The Attorney General says in a release 7 applications were received for the contracts. Mr Dickey says today more than 80% of the firm's work is other legal work, but Crown criminal prosecutions are central to its values as the country's leading litigation firm. He says talks will begin with Ms Walker next week on how to hand over work under the new Manukau warrant. Meredith Connell has 26 partners, 118 lawyers and 67 support staff across offices in Auckland and Wellington.
In business news, Chinese government-owned Waste Management is buying the balance of Living Earth for $8.8 million. The Overseas Investment Office earlier approved an acquisition for Waste Management's parent company, Beijing Capital Group company to take over Trans-Pacific Industries Group Finance New Zealand in 2014. This included 50% of the shares in Living Earth, an organic waste recycling company. Waste Management is now acquiring the remaining 50% of the shares. It told the OIO the purchase will create efficiencies for Living Earth as a wholly owned subsidiary. The acquisition involves purchase of a leasehold interest in 12 hectares on Pukitutu Island and a leasehold interest in 7 hectares in Metro Place, Bromley, Christchurch. Chinese investors have also acquired Whatuwhiwhi Top 10 Holiday Park for $3.8 million, with plans to develop it in conjunction with their adjoining Carrington Resort. The OIO approved the acquisition for the 2.5-hectare freehold land purchase. And that story from Chris Hutching.
NBR. Need to hire? Try our online recruitment platform, www.nbrtalent.co.nz.
I'm Grant Walker. Welcome to Heads Up for Friday the 1st of May. Weekend Review will be streamed from 4 p.m. today, and Heads Up will return 10 a.m. Monday.
How people get their news from websites is undergoing a major change. Mobile devices such as smartphones are taking over from desktop computers. In his Editor's Insight today, Neville Gibson looks at a new State of the News Media report. Neville, what is this report and what's it saying?
The American Pew Research Centre's State of the News Media Report is considered the most authoritative in the industry. It annually surveys all aspects of the news business and reports trends that are likely to happen here in New Zealand and elsewhere. The headline news from the report this year is that mobile devices are the top method of access at 39 of the top 50 digital news websites, and this means that desktop computers are going out of fashion. But Pew says that most of the desktop visitors stay a little bit longer, and the average visit to all sites is just 3 minutes. Incidentally, half of adult Americans now get their news about politics and government from Facebook feeds. So that's pretty interesting too.
Yeah, indeed it is. So what's happening with television?
Well, the interesting trend here that they've picked up is that the big networks and local television news are making a bit of a comeback. But it's been at the expense of cable news, and these are the 24/7 channels. They're down overall 8%. That includes Fox News, which didn't fall as much, MSNBC and CNN. But the biggest rise for local TV news occurs at early morning TV news is taking off, and so are midday bulletins. I'm not sure how they, while the network evening shows are up by a combined average viewership of roughly 24 million. So that's pretty promising from the free-to-air broadcasters' point of view.
It is. It's going against all the trends that people are predicting, isn't it? So with television, does this mean radio is also making a comeback?
Yes, it is, mainly because digital and mobile developments are very good for audio. In fact, podcast listening's on the rise, which I might add is good news for listeners to NBR radio. But in America, the main beneficiary is public radio. It says it's had a 41% increase in downloads in just 1 year.
That's pretty healthy.
That's NPR. That's a big network, but it's run on a local basis. Also, these mobile devices allow you to listen to online radio when you're driving around, and people are listening less on desktop computers. So all in all, it means that online radio listening is really picking up strongly.
Just like we assume subscribers will be listening to NBR radio while they're on the move.
As long as you can learn how to plug your smartphone into your car radio slot.
Whoops, I think I might have to call
Well, you
a
could
stop
listen
there.
with earphones, I guess.
Indeed,
that's
yeah.
quite a popular way of doing it.
So what's the report say about newspapers and magazines?
Well, the Pew Centre, let's face it, is mainly about newspapers and magazines and print. It is really the gold standard for any kind of research in this area. But sadly, newspapers are still losing ground in print, but they're gaining online. Daily and Sunday newspaper circulations in the United States continue to drop. They're down 3% in the past year, and they've fallen nearly 20% over the past decade. But newspaper readers are quite loyal. They're creatures of habit, and more than half of them read print only, while just 5% of them read exclusively on the mobile devices, where you have apps to read the newspapers by flicking through the pages. Magazines that are news-oriented, like the news weeklies, are holding up better than the magazine category as a whole. They rose 1% in newsstands, while newsstand sales only make up a small percentage of total magazine sales, about 7%, but they're considered important because they're a bit of a guide to interest, because they aren't affected by cheap subscription offers and promotions, and magazines in America literally sell for well below their cost. But if you buy it on a newsstand, they measure that as quite a good sign of interest. And the big gainers among the titles in the news area are New York Magazine, The Atlantic and Rolling Stone, all of which are available here, I think, while The Week, which is really just a summary type paper, not available here, and the New Republic had the biggest drops.
So what are the most popular news websites in America?
Well, this is an interesting one too, because Americans actually have 5 British online news websites from newspapers in their top 25. Mail Online is third behind USA Today and the New York Times. But of course, Mail Online's quite a popular one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even in New Zealand, it probably rates very highly.
Mm.
And The Guardian's also popular. That comes in 5th, with the Washington Post coming in 4th. I must say that the Wall Street Journal, which is probably pretty big among New Zealand business readers at least, is not included in this research because it's not classified as a general newspaper. Another feature of these large newspaper sites is that their online traffic far exceeds their print circulation. The standout, of course, is the New York Times. It has a weekday circulation around about 650,000, but its monthly unique visits are around 54 million. It's a paid website if you watch more than 10 articles, and so it has 1.4 million subscribers. They actually pay the New York Times more than all the print subscribers put together. And finally, just the popular news websites, which don't belong to newspapers. The biggest one by far is Yahoo ABC News. That's a clear leader with 130 million. That's pretty much 3 times what the... not quite 3 times, but it's much more than the New York Times. It has 130 million. That was in the month of January. The next most popular of those of CNN, NBC News, and the Huffington Post, which is neither a TV channel nor a newspaper.
Yeah, an interesting peek into the future there, Neville, and maybe these figures are a bit more positive than a lot of people in the newspaper industry in particular would be accepting.
Well, Pew are always looking for positive news, and while there's a lot of material there, they do look for the most popular and positive signs in the industry.
Right. Okay, well, look, we'll wrap it up there, but thanks very much for your editor's insight today, Neville.
NBR Radio with Hotel de Brett, your home away from home, but with better service. NBR Radio.
Business news. Online travel booking business Serko has bought Expedia's Arnold Travel Technology for a confidential nominal sum and expects the acquisition will boost its Australasian transaction volumes by at least a fifth. The all-cash deal is expected to increase sales by 7 to 8% in the 6 months ending September 30, though isn't likely to increase earnings before interest, tax, depreciation and amortisation until the second half of the 2016 financial year, according to Serko. Those forecasts rely on Auckland-based Serko retaining most of Arnold's existing client base. Chief Executive Darren Grafton said this is an important strategic investment for Serko, given we now expect around $4 billion US of Australia's corporate travel spend to be booked through Serko's platforms. Through this transaction and our relationship with Expedia Inc., we're able to continue to serve Arnold's corporate customers and government accounts, significantly build our business and affirm our commitment to our travel management company resellers, which we maintain are crucial to our success in the region. In March, Serko warned annual revenue will probably be 4 to 6% below the 11 million prospectus forecast for the year ended March 31, as some payables were pushed out into the following year. It was also downbeat on the prospects for 2016 due to the strength of the New Zealand dollar and delays to its mobile product, which it anticipated would trim 8% from its forecast for sales of 8.3 million in the 6 months ending September 30. Last year, Serco raised $17 million in new capital, selling 15.5 million new shares at $1.10 apiece via an IPO to fund its growth ambitions and repay debt. Founders Darren Grafton and Bob Shaw sold a further $5 million worth of shares into the offer, retaining about a 20% stake, and have agreed not to sell any more shares until 2 days after Serco announces its 2016 annual result. The company will announce its 2015 annual result on May 22. The shares last traded at 94 cents and have dropped 18% this year. To the EU. The European Union is set to propose new rules that would allow individual member states to ban the sale of genetically modified crops for non-scientific reasons, drawing waves of criticism from the bloc's trading partners and the food industry on both sides of the Atlantic. The US and South American nations fear the plan could wreak havoc on agricultural trade with Europe. These nations export billions of dollars of biotech crops to the 28-nation bloc every year, mainly for use in animal feed. European farm groups are also strongly opposed, as are US biotech giants such as Monsanto. The expected proposal is an attempt by Jean-Claude Juncker, President of the European Commission, the EU's executive arm, to seek a lasting compromise on Europe's regulation of biotech crops. The bloc is bitterly divided on the issue. Some nations, such as the Netherlands, the UK and Spain, support the technology, while France, Austria and others are opposed. The European Parliament and EU national governments must approve the Commission's proposal before it can become law. The EU's trading partners are warning the proposal could run foul of international trade rules enforced by the WTO. US officials also worry the plan could undermine domestic support in the US for reaching a deal on the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, or TTIP, which is under negotiation. For more on this, go to nbr.co.nz.
In dairy industry news, dairy industry commentators say they are surprised and disappointed by Fonterra's announcement on Thursday that it's reduced its forecast farmgate milk price from $4.70 a kilogram of milk solids to $4.50 for this season. Fonterra's farmgate drop amounts to a forecast cash payout of $4.70 to $4.80 for the current season, when the estimated dividend range of 20 to 30 cents is factored in. Fonterra's last milk price review was in late March. Its next was due in late May. A DIRA, Dairy Industry Restructuring Act review, which Fonterra says is still going ahead, and one that will announce its opening forecast price for next season. BNZ senior economist Doug Steele says it's a bit surprising both in terms of timing and magnitude. Obviously, the dairy market has been weak. It was possible that the milk price was going to go down, but we thought that if it was going to happen, it would be announced at the end of May. Mr. Steele says it's unusual but not unprecedented for Fonterra to have a milk price review in April. He says, while it wasn't expected when you look at the extreme volatility that's been happening in the market, as displayed through the global dairy trade auction, prices have moved pretty rapidly in this month and the previous 2 months as well, both up and down. Compared to late season, this season is down $6.7 billion in total, including the dividend change, and the revision today is about a $350 million loss for the industry. Mr. Steele says Thursday morning's announcement is also obviously not a good signal for next season. He says, we think dairy prices will remain pretty sluggish and subdued, at least for the next few months, but we do think there are some signs that global production growth is growing. Our current milk price forecast for next season is $6 a kilogram of milk solids, but there's obviously downward risk around that given current pricing and sentiment. And that story from Jamie Ball.
You're listening to NBR Radio. Upgrade to My NBR Radio with a smartphone-only subscription to NBR Online today for free and receive unlimited access to NBR Online on your smartphone until August 31st. Visit www.nbr.co.nz/free.
I'm Grant Walker. Welcome to Heads Up for Friday the 1st of May. Weekend Review will be streamed from 4 p.m. today and Heads Up will return 10 a.m. Monday. To the housing shortage in Auckland. An in-depth study shows off-site prefabrication of houses can help ease Auckland's housing crisis immediately. The investigation by Pure Advantage, a group of prominent business people investigating ways to catalyse a greener, wealthier New Zealand, says prefabrication offers quick, high-quality, cost-effective, weather-tight housing. The report says methods such as prefabrication are the only way New Zealand can make enough houses to meet demand. Auckland needs 20,000 new houses immediately just to deal with the backlog, and up to 17,000 houses a year after that if 700,000 more people are going to be squeezed into the city over the next 30 years. It's the biggest building boom New Zealand has experienced, and the wall of work is making people nervous if past performance is anything to go by. According to the Productivity Commission, construction productivity has barely moved during the past 30 years. Systematic inefficiencies in a landscape dominated by small operators, a risk-averse culture and sustained skills are the characteristics of an industry caught in a rut. The Commission says it's likely the pressure of rising demand will result in corners being cut. Pure Advantage trustee Philip Mills says increasingly the case for prefabrication is being talked about at government level, and industry players are showing more interest. Business as usual won't cut the housing crisis, he says. Pure Advantage Chief Executive Simon Miller says New Zealand has always taken pride in the idea the country has practical innovators, yet the rest of the world is miles ahead in off-site building methods. In Germany, large panelised off-site construction firms can manufacture houses in hours with a fortnight's finishing on-site. Adopting overseas models is not feasible, according to former Brands Building Science advisor Nikki Bucket. Her 2013 report, Building Better, concluded panelised off-site construction offers the most hope for alleviating the housing crisis. The building industry is already carrying out nearly $3 billion of prefabrication by pre-nailing frames and roof trusses off-site, but it's piecemeal, and house buyers have traditionally been averse to prefabrication for anything other than batches and what the industry is already doing. Prefab New Zealand Chief Executive Pamela Bell says the country is at tipping point. Given concerns about productivity, the industry is warming to using more prefabrication. It has to because it can't deliver the housing needed at one house per builder per year. Ms. Bell says the answer seems to be slowly increasing the amount of pre-built componentry used in a typical house. She doesn't think home buyers would be interested in a prefabricated house turning up fully formed on the back of a truck. She says the frame and truss component everybody is familiar with could be more enclosed when it arrives on site. She says there's enough involved in the transporting and handling of a move to more prefabrication to create a fundamental shift in the way builders assemble houses. Some commentators are asking if the market is big enough to sustain anything other than the traditional Kiwi stick-build approach, particularly after the collapse of house panelisation company eHome. Mr. Miller says prefabrication isn't a silver bullet, but it will make a difference. Business news. Carter Holt Harvey's Australian Building Products unit returned to profit in 2014 as it fattened margins on increased sales, reversed prior impairment charges and reaped a gain in its share of the sale of pulp, paper and packaging businesses. The Australian business, which was renamed Carter Holt Harvey Building Products Proprietary this month, reported a net profit of Australian $167.7 million in calendar 2014, turning from a loss of $14.3 million a year earlier. That included a $43.5 million gain on the sale of operations involved in the manufacture and distribution of packaging materials to Japan's Oji Holdings and Innovation Network Corp of Japan, which bought the New Zealand Group's pulp, paper and packaging businesses last year for $1.04 billion. Stripping out the discontinued operation, Carter Holt's Australian unit posted a profit of $124.1 million Australian, compared to a loss of $17.3 million, with a 17% gain in revenue to $893.2 million. That was bolstered by the reversal of a $50.9 million of impairment charges in prior years and a $55.1 million income tax benefit largely derived from the recognition of previously unrecognised temporary differences, according to the statements. Operating profit from continuing operators more than doubled to $107.5 million, while gross margins widened to 9.4% in the 2014 year, and the unit shaved 46% from its finance expenses to $39.3 million. The financial statements make no mention of whether the company is reviewing its capital structure or ownership, though recent reports claim Graham Hart's Rank Group is being advised by Credit Suisse First Boston, banker Rob Stewart and local affiliate First New Zealand Capital to look at a potential IPO where Hart will sell a 70% stake in the business. Carter Holt Harvey is made up of three divisions: building products makers Wood Products New Zealand and Wood Products Australia, and building products trade and retail supplier Carters. The group yesterday entered a conditional agreement to sell its Copine and Bestwood units to New Zealand Panels Group. For a more in-depth look at the figures, please go to nbr.co.nz. To the Ports deal. Ports of Auckland says the Council's decision to accept the company's compromise to build only one new wharf at the end of Bledisloe multi-cargo terminal is pragmatic. Ports Company Chief Executive Tony Gibson says it's not our preferred outcome because of the impact on the cruise industry. However, it is a workable solution to the current problem. Auckland Council voted to accept the compromise yesterday to build one new wharf and to demolish it if the planned port study recommends against extensions. The Council was evenly split on the issue, and it was passed on Mayor Len Brown's casting vote. The Council had written to Ports of Auckland a month earlier through its shareholder Auckland Council Investments, asking it to stop work until a year-long future port study was finished and decisions made. After extensive talks with Auckland Mayor Len Brown, Chief Executive Stephen Town and other councillors, the port proposed the compromise to the council an hour before an extraordinary meeting was to be held to decide what to do. Mr Gibson says the compromise allows the port to continue to handle Auckland's growing freight needs in the short term, while the long-term future of the port is debated. Under the compromise, POAL will continue building the eastern extension, but put on hold construction of the western extension until after the study. Mr Gibson says the compromise addresses a number of community concerns, especially about sight lines from Queen's Wharf, while providing sufficient berth space for current freight needs and growth in the immediate future. North Shore Councillor Chris Darby, who's been instrumental in leading the protest against the wharf extensions, says the compromise is half-baked and the council had been blackmailed by POAL. He said we're at serious risk of a port blockade. Mayor Len Brown says building just one wharf extension responds to the legitimate concerns of Aucklanders without compromising the ability of the port's company to deal with big increases in freight volumes projects over the next decade. However, there was heated debate around the council table, with Mr Brown threatening to force Councillor Mike Lee out of the meeting after he criticised Ports Company Chairman Graham Hawkins. For more on this, please go to nbr.co.nz.
NBR Radio. With the Property Press. It's out now to show you around.
I'm Grant Walker with Heads Up. Here's what's trending on NBR Online. Ports of Auckland happy council have accepted the wharf deal, but naturally not everyone is happy. McDonald's cans zero-hour contracts. The OCR statement's out, but at the same time, Fonterra slashes the Farmgate milk price. Carter Holt Harvey in selling mode, so what's been sold and how many job losses? The Auckland Council plays down the Taniwha tax. Obama has a stern warning over the TPP. And Ombla will manage the Serra wind down. If you're travelling today, fine weather everywhere. To find out more on our stories, log on to nbr.co.nz or stay tuned. Those stories coming up next on NBR Radio. To the Wynyard Quarter. Willis Bond's unashamedly expensive Wynyard Quarter development will target a 7 Homestar environmental rating, a tool it sponsors through the Green Building Council. Homestar is a rating system for recognising energy-efficient design and construction, and landowner Waterfront Auckland has specified residential development at Wynyard Quarter must meet a 7 Homestar rating. Willis Bond Managing Director Mark McGuinness says sustainability will be one of Wynyard Quarter's defining features. We plan, he says, to make it the country's greenest urban precinct, where a new benchmark is set for sustainable residential communities. He says the housing precinct is the first large-scale development in New Zealand to target the 7 Homestar rating, and it will send a message to the industry that achieving high environmental standards is both achievable for developers and desirable for homeowners and tenants. An appointment-only display suite has been opened showing the prototypes of the 2 projects underway in Wynyard Quarter Urban Village. The village will be set on 2 hectares of land and contain 600 apartments, townhouses and duplexes, housing about 1,100 people over 17 buildings across 5 sites. Wynyard Central is the first site to be developed. It overlooks the recently developed Daldy Street Park and consists of 3-level townhouses and an apartment tower containing 113 units. Construction will start later this year. The centrepiece will be a waterfront site overlooking Viaduct Harbour at 132 Halsey Street. Mr McGuinness says the 51 premium apartments with expansive views of the city's skyline and harbour will be a marriage of its exclusive location and inner-city living coupled with contemporary design. Designed by Athfield Architects, the development is a collection of 3 buildings connected by a central plaza. The apartment complex will have a concierge service, gym, movie theatre and business centre. Willis Bond is planning on an 8 to 10 year project to have the urban village completed, and the first apartments will be ready in mid-2017. Some of the apartments are expected to sell in the $5 million range. Included in the development will be 48,000 square metres of commercial space, including bars, restaurants and cafes, to give the area the life Mr McGuinness says other Auckland waterfront apartment developments lack. Willis Bond has paid up front for a 128-year lease over the land owned by Waterfront Auckland. Mr McGuinness says there will be no ground rent reviews or nasty surprises for owners, such as those delivered to other CBD apartment dwellers. He says the lease is basically as good as a freehold property, and both Willis Bond and Waterfront Auckland are strong advocates of the structure. To condiments. Heinz has dumped a long-standing link with French's to provide the two essentials for the American hot dog, tomato ketchup and yellow mustard. Heinz has launched an advertising campaign that plays on the idea that its ketchup is breaking up with French's yellow mustard in favour of a new relationship with Heinz's own yellow mustard. Heinz North American President Eduardo Luz says it's a new companionship and we're going to pair them as much as possible. Until now, Heinz mustard has primarily been sold through the company's food service business. In making a retail push, Heinz is taking on French's, which is owned by UK-based Reckitt Benckiser Group. French's has a 60% share of the US market, while Heinz has less than 1%. Heinz tipped its hand on its mustard plans last month when 3G Capital and Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway announced a deal to buy Kraft Foods Group and combine it with Heinz. Heinz listed yellow mustard as one of its top 3 big, bold bets in product innovation for 2015 in a presentation released in conjunction with the news of the Kraft merger. Kraft owns the Grey Poupon brand, which is the second biggest selling mustard in the US. The new company will be the third largest food and beverage producer in North America, with sales of about $28 billion.
NBR. With a National Business Review smartphone subscription, you can read or listen to the latest from NBR online. And for a limited time, it's free. Join NBR's Intelligent Business Network today and get free smartphone access to NBR online until August 31st. NBR doesn't do sport, weather or horoscopes, just timely, relevant, useful and insightful business news. So for business news you can use for free, visit nbr.co.nz/free.
Business news. McDonald's has ended its controversial zero-hour contract after an agreement was struck with Unite Union late last night. The deal gives McDonald's workers security for shifts, something Unite has been pushing for since the End Zero-Hour Contracts campaign began. This week, employment negotiations ended abruptly, with Unite accusing McDonald's of walking out in a huff instead of engaging in meaningful negotiations. A McDonald's spokeswoman hit back and slammed Unite for not negotiating in good faith. But an 11th hour deal was struck last night, meaning today's planned strike action will no longer go ahead. The deal means 80% of hours worked over a 3-month period will be guaranteed, and a survey on hours worked will be conducted every 3 months so that secure hours will increase over time. Unite Union Director Mike Treen says this represents a fundamental shift in the employment relationship of the most vulnerable workers in the country. He told NBR Radio on Wednesday he was confident an agreement would be reached before Friday. The guarantee will begin from July 1. The company and union will review the application of this clause in March 2016. Both sides now accept that the clause will lead to greater security and regularity around rostered shifts. This will come as welcome news to some NBR readers after an NBR poll conducted earlier this week revealed 54% of participants thought McDonald's should end zero-hour contracts. The McDonald's agreement means all major fast food chains in New Zealand have now officially ended zero-hour contracts. Unite Union Director Mike Treen says this is a good signal for the rest of the New Zealand workforce. He says Unite calls on the government to turn this decision into law for other workers in the country. In today's National Business Review, as National's opponents continue to fail to make a dent on the government's popularity, it's starting to look as though New Zealand is in for a similar long-running government to that displayed by the Japanese Liberal Democrats since 1955. Freeview has never loomed large on Sky TV investors' horizon. Soon it will. Criminal charges against former bankrupt Jamie Peters were recently dismissed, but this is only because the Ministry of Business dropped the ball procedurally. We look at the whys and what should have happened. Angel investors plugged a record $55.9 million into New Zealand startups last year, with software companies taking the lion's share. When Angel Group investment activity was first measured here in 2006, just over $20 million was being invested annually. Just what is the attraction? New laws come into effect today that will make it harder to register companies for illegal purposes. When it comes to award-winning marketers, the taxman doesn't usually spring to mind. Does now. What is reputation? Why do corporations treat the concept so seriously? A company's reputation is part of the most efficient system of production ever devised for dealing with market competition. Nathan Smith unpacks the machinery of modern business in this inaugural feature for NBR's Intelligent Business series. All this and more today in National Business Review, out now.
NBR Radio with Hotel de Brett, your home away from home, but with better service. NBR Radio.